Victoria Hayes collapsed on a hospital hallway floor at 2:47 a.m., giving birth alone while nurses walked past. No hand to hold. No doctor came. Just cold tile beneath her and a son she named Carter, a child whose father would never know he existed. 4 years later, Victoria stands at iron gates she swore she'd never see again. The Castellano estate. The same mansion where she'd left her infant son in the freezing dark, praying a billionaire would give him the life she couldn't. Now they're hiring a nanny. And Victoria, broken, desperate, with $143 in her bank account, is about to do something insane. She's going to raise her own child. As a stranger. In his father's house. If Dominic Castellano discovers the truth, she'll lose everything. But she's already lost Carter once. She won't survive losing him again. Victoria Hayes was 24 when her world ended at a charity gala. The Palmer House Hilton. She wore a consignment shop dress that cost $47 and felt like an imposter the moment she walked through gilded doors. Her law firm had donated pro bono hours to a children's hospital fundraiser. She was there as support staff. Invisible. Forgettable. Until Dominic Castellano noticed her. He was 31. Heir to Castellano Industries, a manufacturing empire worth $2.3 billion. His family owned half of Chicago's skyline. When he entered a room, conversation stopped. When he spoke, the world listened. He asked what she was drinking. She said water. He laughed and ordered champagne anyway. They talked for 2 hours. About dreams and pressure and futures neither of them could predict. He told her about running his family's company. She told him about wanting law school someday. For those 2 hours, Victoria forgot she was poor. Forgot she was out of place. Forgot everything except the way he looked at her like she mattered. Then the room started spinning. Victoria woke up in a bed that wasn't hers, wearing clothes she didn't recognize, with 8 hours missing from her memory. Dominic was gone. His housekeeper handed her $500 in cash and a car service number. The note said, "Thank you for a wonderful evening. Take care. D." She sat in that hired car, staring at the money, trying to remember. Something was wrong. Something had happened. But the memories wouldn't come. When she tried contacting Dominic through the firm, his assistant made it clear. Mr. Castellano doesn't take personal calls. 6 weeks later, Victoria took a pregnancy test in a Walgreens bathroom on State Street. Positive. Her mother's reaction wasn't shock. It was calculation. Who's the father? Diane Hayes demanded, standing in their cramped Gary, Indiana apartment. Dominic Castellano. For exactly 4 seconds, Diane's face lit up. Visions of settlements. Payoffs. A lifetime of comfort. Then reality crashed down. You were drugged, you said? I think so. I don't remember. Then you have nothing. Diane's voice turned sharp as broken glass. No proof. No witnesses. The Castellanos have lawyers who eat girls like you for breakfast. You go to them with this story, they'll destroy you. They'll say you're a gold digger. A liar. They'll bury you so deep you'll never crawl out. Victoria's hands shook. But it's his child. He has a right to nothing. Diane screamed. You stupid, careless girl. You've ruined everything. Every dollar I invested in raising you, wasted. Her brother Marcus stood in the doorway, arms crossed, that familiar smirk playing on his lips. Maybe we can still use this. Baby's gonna come out looking like money, right? Castellano jeans? We could. Get out of my house, Diane said, her voice suddenly cold and final. She wasn't talking to Marcus. Victoria's heart stopped. Mom? I said get out. You're not my daughter anymore. You're a liability. A burden. I'm done cleaning up your mistakes. Victoria Hayes, 24 years old and 3 months pregnant, was thrown out with $217 to her name and nowhere to go. For 6 months, she lived in her 2004 Honda Civic. She parked in different lots around Chicago, moving every few nights to avoid police. She showered at the YMCA. She ate once a day from dollar menus. She worked temp jobs when she could find them, but once her pregnancy showed, offers dried up. By her 8th month, she'd saved $1,847. Not enough for an apartment. Barely enough to survive. On that winter night when her water broke in a McDonald's bathroom on West Madison Street, Victoria drove herself to Northwestern Memorial Hospital. She walked into the emergency room and told them she had no insurance, no money, no family. The intake nurse barely looked up. Wait over there. Victoria waited. 4:47 minutes, while contractions grew closer together and pain became unbearable. She asked for help 3 times. Each time she was told to wait. Then her body couldn't wait anymore. She gave birth in that hallway. On the floor. Alone. A janitor found her. By the time help arrived, Carter was born. 6 pounds 4 ounces, screaming into a world that had already failed him and his mother. A doctor finally cut the umbilical cord. A nurse took Carter to check his vitals. Aunt Victoria lay there on that cold floor, staring at fluorescent lights overhead, understanding with perfect clarity that she could not give this child the life he deserved. She had no home, no money, no support. Her own mother had abandoned her. The father of her child didn't even know he existed, or wouldn't care if he did. But Dominic Castellano had everything. Wealth beyond measure. Security. Opportunity. Everything Victoria could never provide. So she made a choice that would haunt every moment of her life afterward. 3 days after Carter's birth, she would leave him at the Castellano estate gates. And then she would disappear. Dominic Castellano stood at his front gate at 4:23 a.m., staring at the infant carrier like it might explode. Security had called him minutes earlier. Someone left a baby at his gate. The carrier was covered with a thin blanket. Inside, a newborn slept, oblivious to the cold or the chaos he'd just created. Tucked beside him was a note, hospital records, and a birth certificate. Dominic's hands shook as he read. His name is Carter. He was born January 19th at Northwestern Memorial Hospital. You are his father. I can't give him what you can. Please take care of our son. Please. Bish. The birth certificate listed him as father. Victoria Hayes as mother. He didn't remember her. Not really. The paralegal from the gala, he'd been drunk that night, he'd admit that. But not so drunk he'd forget sleeping with someone. Yet the timeline matched. December 14th to January 19th. Exactly 9 months. His grandfather, Angelo Castellano, 83 years old and still terrifying, stood behind him like a judge delivering a verdict. Bring the child inside, Angelo commanded. We'll get a DNA test. If he's yours, you will raise him. The Castellano name doesn't abandon its own. 3 days later the results came back. 99.97% probability of paternity. The baby left at his gate was his biological son. Dominic stood in his grandfather's study, holding the paper in hands that wouldn't stop shaking. He had a son. A child he'd created with a woman he couldn't remember, from a night that existed only in fragments. You will raise this child, Angelo said. Do you understand me? No, I don't even remember. I don't care what you remember. Angelo's voice cracked like thunder. That boy is your son. Your responsibility. Your heir. Find the mother. Bring her into this family. Make this right. Dominic hired 3 private investigation firms. They searched for Victoria Hayes for 11 months. But Victoria had changed her name, legally, quietly, to Victoria Monroe, and disappeared into Chicago's South Side. She worked cash jobs. She slept in shelters. She stayed invisible. She'd learned how to vanish from a lifetime of being overlooked. Eventually the investigators came back empty. The mother was gone. But Carter remained. And despite everything, despite the confusion and the questions and the guilt, Dominic fell in love with his son. The boy had his eyes. His stubborn chin. His mother's softness somewhere in there too, though Dominic had never seen her face long enough to be sure. Carter's first word was Dada. His first steps were in the mansion's marble foyer. His first laugh came when Dominic pretended to drop him and caught him at the last second. Still, something about fatherhood haunted Dominic. A sense that he'd failed before he'd even started. That somewhere out there, a woman had been desperate enough to leave her child on a stranger's doorstep. What had driven her to that? What circumstances had made abandoning her son feel like the best choice? And what responsibility did he bear for that desperation? The questions kept him awake at night. They followed him through board meetings and family dinners. They whispered in his ear every time Carter asked about his mother. Where's Mama? Carter would say, looking up with those impossibly innocent eyes. And Dominic would kneel down, pull his son close and lie. She loved you very much. She made a choice she thought was best. But he didn't know if that was true. He didn't know anything about her. 3 nannies came and went in Carter's first 4 years. The first quit after 2 months, saying Carter was too difficult. The second lasted 6 months before claiming the job was emotionally draining. The third made it 8 months before walking out after Carter had a meltdown in a grocery store. He doesn't trust easily, she'd said on her way out. He's waiting for someone. I don't know who. But it's not me. Dominic understood. Carter had been abandoned once. Some part of him, some instinct buried deep in his 4-year-old brain, was still waiting for the person who'd left him to come back. By the winter, Dominic was exhausted. Running a billion-dollar company while raising a traumatized 4-year-old alone was destroying him. His grandfather pushed him toward marriage, specifically toward Amanda Whitmore, daughter of a real estate magnate, a woman who looked perfect on paper but felt empty in person. "You need a wife," Angelo insisted. "Carter needs a mother. Amanda is suitable." Suitable. Not loving. Not kind. Suitable. Dominic proposed anyway. Because his grandfather was right about one thing. Carter needed stability. Structure. A family that looked normal even if it felt hollow. The engagement was announced in the Chicago Tribune. The wedding was set for June. And then Francesca, the house manager, came to him with a solution to his nanny problem. "There's a candidate," she said. "Victoria Monroe. Excellent references. Experience with children. She seems different from the others. Patient. Genuine." Dominic barely listened. He was drowning in contracts and custody schedules and wedding planning he didn't care about. "Set up an interview," he said. He had no idea he'd just invited Carter's biological mother back into their lives. 4 years later, Victoria Monroe stood outside the Castellano estate on a Tuesday morning, wearing a blazer she'd bought at Goodwill for $12 and carrying a resume full of half-truths. Her heart hammered so hard she thought she might collapse right there on the driveway. The gates opened. A security guard waved her through. She walked past gardens that belonged in magazines, toward a house that looked more like a museum than a home. Every step felt like walking toward her own execution. She told herself 1,000 times this was insane. Reckless. Dangerous. But the moment she'd seen that job posting, 4-year-old boy, Winnetka address, $4,200 a month, something inside her snapped. She could see him. Just once. Just to know he was safe. The diner where she worked nights had cut her hours. Her landlord had raised rent again. She had $143 in her bank account and a past she couldn't escape. The universe was giving her a chance to see her son, and she was too desperate to refuse. A woman in her 50s answered the door. "Ms. Monroe? I'm Francesca, the house manager. Mr. Castellano is waiting in the study." Victoria followed her through rooms that smelled like old money and new leather. Marble floors. Crystal chandeliers. Oil paintings that probably cost more than she'd earned in her entire life. Then she saw him. Dominic Castellano stood by a window overlooking the lake. He'd aged in 4 years, there were lines around his eyes that hadn't been there before, a weariness in his posture, but he still had that same presence. That same dangerous charisma that had drawn her in at the gala. He turned. Their eyes met. Victoria's entire body went cold. Did he recognize her? Would he remember? "Ms. Monroe," Dominic said, extending his hand. "Thank you for coming." His grip was firm. Professional. There was no recognition in his eyes. No spark of memory. To him she was a complete stranger. Relief and heartbreak hit her simultaneously. "Of course," Victoria managed. "Thank you for the opportunity." They sat. Dominic asked about her experience with children. She lied smoothly. She'd worked at a daycare years ago, she said. She loved children. She believed in structure and creativity in equal measure. All true technically. Just not the whole truth. "My son is special," Dominic said carefully. "Carter. He's 4. Incredibly smart. But he's been through 3 nannies in the past year. He doesn't trust easily." Victoria's throat tightened at hearing Carter's name spoken aloud. Her son. The child she'd held for only 3 days before leaving him in this man's care. "What happened with the previous nannies?" she asked. "They quit. Said he was too difficult. Too attached or not attached enough. I think." Dominic hesitated, and for a moment, Victoria saw something vulnerable in his expression. "I think he senses something's missing. His mother. He asks about her sometimes. I don't know what to tell him." Victoria's hands clenched in her lap. "What do you tell him?" "That she loved him very much. That she made a choice she thought was best. But honestly..." Dominic's voice dropped. "I don't know if that's true. I don't know anything about her. She disappeared before I could find her. I searched for almost a year. Every lead went nowhere." He'd searched for her. For 11 months. The knowledge hit Victoria like a physical blow. "Maybe she had her reasons," Victoria said quietly. "Maybe." Dominic looked out the window. "Or maybe she just didn't care enough to stay." Before Victoria could respond, before she could defend herself against an accusation he didn't even know he was making, the study door burst open. And there he was. Carter Castellano. 4 years old. Dark curly hair that fell across his forehead. Dominic's sharp eyes. Her nose. Her smile. Her son. Victoria forgot how to breathe. He stood in the doorway holding a stuffed elephant that looked well-loved and threadbare. He stared at Victoria with an intensity that made time stop. "Carter," Dominic said gently. "This is Ms. Monroe. She might be your new nanny." The boy didn't move. Just kept staring at Victoria like he was trying to solve an impossible puzzle. Victoria knelt down to his eye level, desperate to be closer to him, to see every detail of the child she'd created. "Hi, Carter. That's a cool elephant. What's his name?" Silence stretched between them. Then, so quietly she almost missed it, "Trunks." "Trunks is a great name," Victoria said softly, her voice threatening to break. "I bet he goes on a lot of adventures with you." Carter took 3 steps forward. He studied Victoria's face like he was searching for something buried deep in his memory, something he shouldn't be able to remember but somehow did. Then he did something that made both Victoria and Dominic freeze in shock. He climbed into Victoria's lap. He wrapped his small arms around her neck and buried his face in her shoulder. And he started crying. Not loud, dramatic sobs. Quiet, broken sounds that suggested he'd been holding something in for far too long. Like a wound that had never properly healed finally opening up. Dominic moved to intervene, but Victoria held up a hand. She wrapped her arms around Carter, around her son, her child, the piece of her heart she'd left behind, and rocked him gently. "It's okay," she whispered, tears burning behind her eyes. "It's okay. I'm here." "You smell like my mama," Carter said into her shoulder, his voice muffled and small. "I don't remember her but I dream about her and she smells like you." Victoria's world tilted. How could he remember? He'd been 3 days old. But children knew things adults couldn't explain. They recognized truth in ways logic couldn't touch. "Maybe your mama sent me," Victoria said carefully, holding him tighter. "Maybe she knew you needed someone and she made sure I found you." Carter pulled back and looked at her with those impossibly old eyes, eyes that had seen abandonment and understood loss in ways 4-year-olds shouldn't. "Will you stay?" he asked. Victoria looked at Dominic. His expression was stunned. Well, maybe a little jealous of the connection his son had just made with a complete stranger. But mostly he looked relieved. "Yes," Victoria said, making a promise she had no idea if she could keep. "I'll stay." Dominic hired her on the spot. $7,000 a month. Room and board included in the guest house on the property. She would be available 6 days a week with Sundays off. Victoria Monroe, formerly Victoria Hayes, mother to the child she'd abandoned 4 years ago, had just been hired to be her own son's nanny. And neither Dominic nor Carter had any idea who she really was. Subscribe now if you want to see how long Victoria can keep this secret. Because when the truth comes out, and it will, everything will explode. Victoria moved into the Castellano Estate guest house on a Thursday afternoon with everything she owned fitting into 2 duffel bags. The guest house was bigger than any apartment she'd ever lived in. Hardwood floors. A marble bathroom. A kitchen with appliances she didn't know how to use. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the lake. She stood in the middle of the living room and cried for the first time in months. Not because it was beautiful. Because 4 years ago she'd been sleeping in her car in January, giving birth alone on a hospital floor, convinced she'd die invisible and forgotten. And now she was living on a billionaire's estate, steps away from the son she'd thought she'd lost forever. The universe had a cruel sense of humor. That first night Victoria barely slept. She kept walking to the window, staring at the main house, wondering which room was Carter's. Wondering if he was asleep or awake. Wondering if he was thinking about the woman who smelled like his mama. At 6:47 a.m., there was a knock on her door. She opened it to find Carter standing there in dinosaur pajamas, clutching Trunks the elephant, looking up at her with those heartbreaking eyes. "You're still here?" he whispered. Victoria's throat closed. "Of course I'm still here. I told you I'd stay." The other nanny said that too. Then they left. Victoria knelt down until they were eye level. "I'm not like the other nannies, Carter. When I make a promise, I keep it." He studied her face for a long moment. Then he held out his hand. "Will you make me breakfast?" Victoria took his small hand in hers, her son's hand, warm and real and trusting, and let him lead her toward the main house. The kitchen was enormous. Commercial-grade appliances. Granite countertops that stretched forever. A refrigerator the size of her old apartment's closet. "What do you like for breakfast?" Victoria asked. "Pancakes. But not the kind Mrs. Chin makes. She makes them too flat." Victoria smiled. "What if I make them fluffy? Would that be better?" Carter nodded seriously. "Very fluffy. With chocolate chips." As Victoria mixed batter, Carter sat at the kitchen island, swinging his legs and talking. About his dinosaur collection. About how his dad worked too much. About how his grandpa Angelo was scary but gave good hugs. About how he didn't like his dad's fiancée Amanda because she smiled with her mouth but not her eyes. Every word was a gift Victoria had never expected to receive. She'd resigned herself to never knowing her son, and now he was here, telling her about his world, letting her in. When she set the plate of pancakes in front of him, perfectly fluffy, studded with chocolate chips, Carter took one bite and looked up at her with wonder. "These are the best pancakes in the whole world," he said. Victoria's eyes burned. "I'm glad you like them." "My mama would have made good pancakes too," Carter said quietly. "I think she would have." "Do you think she would have?" Victoria sat down beside him, choosing her words carefully. "I think your mama loved you more than anything in the whole world. And if she could have made you pancakes every single day, she would have." Carter considered this. Then why did she leave? The question hung in the air like smoke. "Sometimes," Victoria said slowly, "people have to make really hard choices. Choices that hurt them but help someone else. Your mama left because she wanted you to have a better life than she could give you. Not because she didn't love you. Because she loved you too much to keep you in a place where you couldn't grow." Carter was quiet for a moment. Then, "That's sad." "Yes," Victoria whispered. "It is. But you're here now. So maybe it's less sad." Victoria pulled him into a hug, pressing her face into his hair, breathing in the scent of him, baby shampoo and syrup and something uniquely Carter. "Maybe it is." Dominic found them like that 20 minutes later, Victoria and Carter at the kitchen table, surrounded by empty plates and easy laughter, looking for all the world like they'd known each other forever. He stopped in the doorway, coffee cup frozen halfway to his mouth, staring at a scene he'd never witnessed before. Carter happy. Relaxed. Connected to someone who wasn't him. "Good morning," Victoria said, standing quickly, suddenly aware of how intimate the moment looked. Carter wanted pancakes. "I hope that's okay." "It's fine," Dominic said, but his voice was strange. Tight. "Carter, you know you're not supposed to bother Ms. Monroe when she's off duty." "I wasn't bothered," Victoria said quickly. "I was happy to make breakfast." Carter looked between the two adults, sensing tension he didn't understand. "Ms. Monroe makes better pancakes than Mrs. Chen." "I'm sure Mrs. Chen does her best," Dominic said stiffly. An awkward silence fell. Victoria busied herself clearing plates, hyper-aware of Dominic's presence, of the way he watched her move through his kitchen like she belonged there. "I have a board meeting this morning," Dominic said finally. "I'll be gone until 3. Francesca has Carter's schedule. Swimming lessons at 10. Lunch at noon. Quiet time after that." "Understood," Victoria said. Dominic hesitated at the doorway. "Miss Monroe?" "Yes. Thank you. For this." He gestured vaguely at Carter, who was now building a tower out of napkin rings. "For making him smile. The last nanny couldn't manage that in 8 months." Before Victoria could respond, he was gone. Carter looked up at her. "Do you like my dad?" The question caught her off guard. "I don't really know your dad yet." "He's sad a lot," Carter said matter-of-factly. "He tries to hide it but I can tell. Maybe you can make him smile too." Victoria's heart cracked open. "Maybe." What she didn't say, "I already broke your father's heart once. I just don't think he remembers." The days fell into a rhythm. Victoria woke early, made Carter breakfast, took him to swimming lessons and music classes and playdates with children whose parents owned skyscrapers. She read him stories before bed. She invented games. She learned every detail of his 4-year-old world and filed each piece away like treasure. And slowly, carefully she started to believe maybe, just maybe, she could do this. She could be Carter's nanny without destroying everything. She could keep her secret and keep her son close and somehow make it work. She should have known nothing that perfect could last. On her 6th day at the estate, Victoria was folding Carter's laundry in the second-floor hallway when she heard voices drifting from the study downstairs. Dominic's voice. And a woman's voice she didn't recognize. "The nanny is too attached to Carter already," the woman said. "It's inappropriate. You barely know her. Amanda, Carter is happy for the first time in months. I'm not firing her because you're insecure." "I'm not insecure. I'm concerned." "Who is this Victoria Monroe? Where did she come from? Don't you think it's strange how quickly Carter bonded with her?" Victoria's blood ran cold. "Children bond with people who show them genuine affection," Dominic said tiredly. "Maybe if you tried." "Don't," Amanda cut him off, her voice sharp. "Don't make this about me. I'm trying to protect you." Protect Carter. This woman appears out of nowhere, has zero social media presence, and suddenly she's living on your property and raising your son? That doesn't strike you as suspicious? Silence. Then Dominic's voice, quieter now. What are you suggesting? I'm suggesting you run a deeper background check. I'm suggesting you find out who Victoria Monroe really is before you trust her with the most important thing in your life. Victoria's hands shook. The laundry basket slipped from her grip, landing with a soft thud on the hallway carpet. She pressed herself against the wall, heart pounding, mind racing. Amanda was suspicious. Amanda was asking questions. And if Dominic started digging, if he ran a background check that was too thorough, he might find the name change. He might find Victoria Hayes. He might connect the dots. Subscribe now because Victoria's perfect illusion is about to shatter. And when it does, she'll have to decide, run away again or fight for the son she's already lost once. Victoria met Amanda Whitmore for the first time 2 days later, and she understood immediately why Carter didn't like her. Amanda arrived at the estate at 11 on a Saturday morning, dressed in cream-colored Chanel that probably cost more than Victoria earned in 3 months. She was beautiful in the way magazine covers were beautiful. Polished, perfect, and completely lifeless. Victoria was in the backyard with Carter, building a fort out of fallen branches and old bedsheets. Carter's laughter echoed across the lawn as he declared himself king of the fortress. "Carter, darling," Amanda called from the patio, her voice sweet as artificial sugar. "Come say hello." Carter's smile vanished. He pressed closer to Victoria. "Do I have to?" "She's going to be your stepmother," Victoria said quietly, hating every word. "You should at least be polite." Carter trudged toward Amanda with the enthusiasm of someone walking toward detention. Amanda bent down, carefully so her dress wouldn't wrinkle, and kissed the air beside his cheek. "You're covered in dirt," Amanda said, her smile tight. "Why don't you go clean up? Ms. Monroe and I need to chat." Carter looked back at Victoria with pleading eyes. She nodded gently. "Go on. I'll be right here." The moment Carter disappeared into the house, Amanda's smile dropped like a mask. "So you're the miracle nanny," Amanda said, walking toward Victoria with the predatory grace of a leopard sizing up prey. "The one who's managed to bewitch my fiancé's son in less than a week." "I'm just doing my job," Victoria said evenly. "Are you?" Amanda circled her slowly. "Because from where I'm standing, you seem awfully comfortable here. Moving into the guest house. Making yourself indispensable. Getting between a father and his son." "I'm not getting between anyone." "Really?" Amanda's eyes were cold. "Dominic talks about you constantly. Carter asks for you before he asks for his own father. You've been here 6 days and you've already rearranged their entire dynamic." Victoria kept her voice steady. "Carter needed someone who would stay. Someone patient. That's all I'm doing." "No." Amanda stepped closer, invading Victoria's space. "You're doing something else. I just haven't figured out what yet." Their eyes met. 2 women. One protecting a lie. One hunting for the truth. "I looked into you," Amanda continued, her voice dropping to something dangerous. "Victoria Monroe. No social media. No digital footprint. It's like you didn't exist until 4 years ago." Victoria's heart slammed against her ribs. Some people value privacy. Or some people have something to hide. Amanda smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "I'm going to find out which one you are." Before Victoria could respond, Dominic appeared on the patio. "Amanda. I didn't know you were coming by." "I wanted to meet the famous nanny," Amanda said, her voice instantly warmer, softer. She crossed to Dominic and kissed him, a proprietary gesture that made Victoria's stomach turn. "Now I have." Dominic's eyes moved between the 2 women, sensing tension he didn't understand. "Is everything okay?" "Perfect," Amanda said. "Ms. Monroe and I were just getting acquainted." "Weren't we?" Victoria forced a smile. "Of course." But as Amanda left an hour later, Victoria felt the noose tightening around her neck. That night, Victoria couldn't sleep. She paced the guest house, mind racing through scenarios. What if Amanda found Victoria Hayes? What if she discovered the name change? What if she put together the timeline? Baby abandoned January 19th, Victoria Monroe emerging from nowhere around the same time. At 2 a.m., her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "I know you're hiding something. Leave now and I'll keep quiet. Stay and I'll destroy you. A W." Victoria stared at the screen, hands shaking. Amanda was threatening her. Pushing her out. Trying to remove her from Carter's life before she'd barely arrived. Every instinct screamed at Victoria to run. To pack her 2 duffel bags and disappear again, to protect herself the way she'd learned to survive. But then she thought of Carter. Of his small arms around her neck. Of his voice saying, "Will you stay?" Of the way he'd finally started smiling again. She'd abandoned him once. She wouldn't do it again. Victoria deleted the text and made a decision. If Amanda wanted war, she'd get one. The next morning, Victoria found Francesca in the kitchen and asked a careful question. "Has Mr. Castellano always been engaged to Ms. Whitmore?" Francesca's expression flickered, something like distaste crossing her features before she schooled them back to neutral. The engagement was arranged by his grandfather 6 months ago. A business merger as much as a marriage. Does he love her? Francesca was quiet for a moment. Then, Mr. Dominic loves his son. Everything else is secondary. Why do you ask? Just trying to understand the household dynamics, Victoria said smoothly. But what she really heard was, Dominic didn't love Amanda. This marriage was obligation, not desire. Which meant there was a crack in Amanda's armor. A vulnerability Victoria could use if she needed to. She hated thinking like this. Strategizing. Manipulating. But Amanda had fired the first shot. And Victoria had too much to lose to play fair. Over the next week, Victoria watched. She noticed how Amanda barely interacted with Carter unless Dominic was present. How she talked about the wedding constantly but never about becoming Carter's mother. How she looked at the estate like she was already calculating its resale value. Amanda didn't want a family. She wanted a trophy. A title. A place in Chicago's elite society. And Victoria realized something crucial. Amanda was more interested in the Castellano name than the Castellano people. Which meant her biggest fear wasn't Victoria stealing Dominic's heart. It was Victoria threatening her access to his wealth and status. On Victoria's 10th day at the estate, Amanda showed up unannounced again. But this time she wasn't alone. She brought a private investigator. Victoria was reading to Carter in the library when Francesca appeared in the doorway, her face tight with concern. "Ms. Monroe, Mr. Castellano needs to see you in his study." Immediately. Carter looked up from his book. "Is Ms. Monroe in trouble?" "Of course not, sweetheart," Victoria said, her voice calm even as panic flooded her veins. "I'll be right back." She walked down the hallway on legs that felt like water. Through the open study door, she could see Dominic sitting behind his desk, his face unreadable. Amanda stood beside him, arms crossed, looking triumphant. And beside Amanda stood a man in a cheap suit holding a manila folder. Victoria's entire world tilted. "Ms. Monroe," Dominic said, his voice carefully controlled. "Please sit down." Victoria sat, her hands clasped in her lap to hide their shaking. The investigator opened the folder. "I've been looking into your background, Ms. Monroe. And I've found some interesting inconsistencies." "Such as?" Victoria's voice came out steadier than she felt. "Such as the fact that Victoria Monroe didn't exist before March. No employment records. No tax returns. No rental history." He pulled out a document. "Then I found a legal name change filed in Cook County. Victoria Hayes to Victoria Monroe. February." The room went silent. Dominic's eyes locked on Victoria. "You changed your name?" "Yes," Victoria said quietly. "Why?" "Because I was running from a life that broke me. Because I needed to disappear. Because I left my son on your doorstep and couldn't bear to be the woman who did that anymore." "Personal reasons," she said instead. "That's not good enough," Amanda cut in. "Who were you running from? An ex-boyfriend? The law? What are you hiding?" The investigator pulled out another document. "I looked into Victoria Hayes. Worked as a paralegal assistant. Then her employment records stop. She drops off the grid entirely. Victoria's blood turned to ice. January was when she'd given birth. February was when she'd changed her name. March was when she'd finally found stable housing and started working again. If they kept digging, if they found hospital records, if they connected the dates." "Wait," Dominic said slowly, his face changing. "You were a paralegal assistant in December?" "Yes," Victoria whispered. "Did you work on the Children's Hospital Charity Gala?" The question hung in the air like a guillotine blade. Victoria's silence was answer enough. Dominic stood up slowly, his face draining of color. "The gala at the Palmer House. December 14th. You were there." "Mr. Castellano, you were there?" he repeated, his voice rising. "You were at the gala. Where I met." He stopped. His eyes widened. Victoria Hayes." Amanda looked between them, confused. What is he talking about? But Dominic wasn't looking at Amanda. He was staring at Victoria like he was seeing a ghost. "You're Carter's mother?" he whispered. The words detonated like a bomb in the quiet study. Victoria couldn't speak, couldn't move, could only watch as everything she'd built in 10 days shattered into pieces at her feet. "You're Carter's mother?" Dominic said again, louder now. "You left him at my gate 4 years ago. And then you came back and applied to be his nanny. You've been living in my house taking care of our son, and you didn't tell me." "Dominic. Don't." He held up a hand, his face a mask of fury and betrayal. "Don't say my name. Don't say anything. Get out. Please let me explain. Get out of my house." The roar echoed through the mansion. "Get away from my son. Get out before I call the police and have you arrested for fraud, for deception, for—" His voice broke. "For abandoning your child and then manipulating your way back into his life." Victoria stood on shaking legs. "I never meant to hurt anyone. You left our son in the cold. Alone. On a doorstep." Dominic's eyes were blazing. "You walked away and didn't look back. And now you want sympathy?" "I looked back every single day," Victoria said, tears finally breaking free. "Every single day for 4 years I thought about him. I wanted to give him a life I couldn't provide. I wanted—" "You wanted to ease your own guilt," Amanda interjected, her voice dripping with satisfaction. "And you thought you could worm your way into this family by playing the devoted nanny. Well, it's over. Dominic, call security." But Dominic was still staring at Victoria, his expression unreadable now. Beneath the anger, something else flickered. Questions. Confusion. Maybe even understanding trying to break through rage. "Get out," he said quietly. "You have 1 hour to pack your things and leave this property. If you ever come near Carter again, I will use every legal resource I have to bury you." Victoria walked out of the study with her head high and her heart in pieces. But as she passed the library, she heard Carter's voice calling for her. "Miss Monroe. Miss Monroe, where are you going?" She couldn't answer. Couldn't look back. Because if she saw his face, she'd break completely. Subscribe now, because Victoria just lost everything for the second time. But what happens next will shock you. Because someone in that study knows more than they're saying. And the truth about what really happened at that gala 4 years ago? It's about to blow this entire family apart. Victoria made it to the guest house before her legs gave out. She collapsed against the door, sliding to the floor, finally letting the sobs break free. 4 years of guilt and grief and desperate hope, all of it crashing down in one devastating moment. She'd been caught, exposed, cast out. Again. She had 53 minutes to pack her life into 2 duffel bags and disappear. 53 minutes before security dragged her off the property. 53 minutes before she lost Carter forever. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Meet me at the corner of Sheridan and Oak in 30 minutes. Come alone. I have information you need. JT." Victoria stared at the initials. JT. She didn't know anyone with those initials. Could be a trap. Amanda's next move. Another way to humiliate her. But what did she have left to lose? 28 minutes later, Victoria stood on a street corner 3 blocks from the estate, watching traffic pass, wondering if she'd just made the stupidest decision of her life. A black Mercedes pulled up. The window rolled down. The man behind the wheel was in his 40s, well-dressed, with the kind of face that had seen too much and regretted most of it. "Victoria Hayes," he said. "Get in." "Who are you?" "Julian Torres. I was Dominic Castellano's associate 4 years ago. And I'm the reason you don't remember that night." Victoria's blood froze. "What?" "Get in the car. We don't have much time. If Dominic finds out I'm talking to you, we're both finished." Victoria climbed into the passenger seat, her mind spinning. Julian drove in silence for 3 blocks before pulling into an empty parking garage. He turned off the engine and stared straight ahead. "I drugged your drink at the gala," he said flatly. "Rohypnol. Slipped it into your champagne while Dominic was distracted. You never consented to anything that happened that night. Because you were unconscious." Victoria couldn't breathe. Couldn't process what she was hearing. "Why?" The word came out strangled. "Because I was following orders," Julian said, his voice heavy with something like shame. "Not Dominic's orders. His grandfather's." "Angelo Castellano told you to drug me?" "Angelo told me to make sure Dominic had a good time that night. He'd been watching you 2 talk for an hour. He saw how Dominic looked at you, like you were real, like you mattered, and he hated it. You were nobody. A paralegal making $38,000 a year. Angelo couldn't risk Dominic getting attached to someone so far beneath the family." Victoria's hands clenched into fists. So you assaulted me to protect their reputation? I'm not defending what I did, Julian said quietly. I'm just telling you what happened. I drugged you. Dominic took you to his penthouse. He was drunk, not thinking clearly. His housekeeper called me 3 hours later, panicking. You were unconscious in the guest room. Dominic was passed out in his own room. Nothing had happened between you. Then how? Angelo found out you were there. He came to the penthouse at 4 a.m. with a private doctor. The doctor performed an artificial insemination while you were still unconscious. Victoria thought she might vomit. What? Angelo wanted an heir. Dominic kept refusing to settle down, refusing to marry the women Angelo picked for him. So Angelo took matters into his own hands. He had the doctor harvest genetic material from Dominic and implant it in you while you were unconscious. Then he had you dressed and put in a car service with cash and a note. Dominic doesn't know, Victoria whispered, the pieces finally falling into place. He thinks we slept together naturally. He has no idea what really happened. None of us were supposed to talk about it. Ever. Angelo paid the doctor $2 million to disappear to Switzerland. He paid me $500,000 to keep quiet. And he paid your family? Victoria's head snapped up. My family? Julian's expression darkened. Your mother, Diane Hayes. Angelo tracked her down 2 days after you left the penthouse. He told her what happened. Told her you were probably pregnant. Told her that if she encouraged you to keep quiet, to stay away from the Castellanos, he'd pay her $50,000. The betrayal hit Victoria like a physical blow. Her mother had known. Had known she'd been assaulted and impregnated against her will. Had taken money to stay silent. She threw me out, Victoria said numbly. She called me stupid and careless and threw me out when I told her I was pregnant. Because if you'd gone to the Castellanos, if you'd demanded a paternity test, Angelo's plan would have fallen apart. He needed you gone. Invisible. So he paid your mother to make that happen. Victoria pressed her hands to her face, trying to process the enormity of what she'd just learned. Why are you telling me this now? Because Angelo died 3 weeks ago. Heart attack. And without him controlling everything, the truth is starting to leak. Amanda Whitmore has been asking questions. She hired investigators to dig into the night Carter was conceived. She's close to finding out what Angelo did. Why does Amanda care? Because if it comes out that Carter was conceived through assault and medical intervention, that Dominic never actually consented to creating an heir, there could be legal challenges to Carter's legitimacy, to his inheritance rights. Angelo's empire is worth billions. Amanda doesn't want a child with a questionable legal claim standing between her and that money. Victoria's mind raced. What do you want from me? I want to help you, Julian said. I've carried this guilt for 4 years. I destroyed your life because I was a coward who followed evil orders. Let me make it right. I have documentation. Medical records. Bank transfers showing Angelo's payments. Audio recordings of him giving orders. Everything we need to prove what really happened. Why not just go to the police? Because the Castellano family has half the Chicago Police Department in their pocket. We need leverage first. We need Dominic on our side. And right now he thinks you're a manipulative liar who abandoned her child. We need to change that narrative. Victoria stared out the windshield at concrete pillars and shadows. He'll never believe me. He just threw me out of his house. He told me if I ever came near Carter again, he'd bury me. He said that because he's hurt and confused and has no idea what really happened. But Dominic isn't like his grandfather. He's not corrupt. He's not cruel. If we show him the truth, the real truth, he'll listen. And if he doesn't? Julian reached into the back seat and pulled out a thick manila envelope. Then we go to the press. We expose everything. Angelo might be dead, but his crimes aren't. The Castellano family will be crucified in the media. Their business will collapse. And Dominic will finally understand what his family did to you. Victoria took the envelope with shaking hands. Inside were documents, photographs, bank statements. Proof of conspiracy. Proof of assault. Proof that she'd been telling the truth all along. Why are you really doing this? Victoria asked. What do you get out of it? Julian was quiet for a long moment. I have a daughter. She's 3. When I look at her, I think about what I did to you. About how I helped powerful men treat a woman like a breeding animal. And I wonder what kind of world I'm leaving for my little girl. One where men like Angelo Castellano can do whatever they want? Or one where people finally face consequences for their crimes? He started the engine. I'll drop you back at the corner. Read through everything in that envelope. Then decide what you want to do. You have my number. Call me when you're ready to fight back. Victoria clutched the envelope to her chest. Dominic gave me an hour to leave his property. That time's almost up. Then you'd better decide fast whether you're running again or standing your ground. 10 minutes later, Victoria stood outside the guest house, staring at her packed duffel bags. She could take Julian's evidence and disappear. Start over somewhere new. Again. Or she could march back into that mansion and force Dominic to hear the truth. The first option was safer. Easier. The pattern she'd followed her entire life. The second option was terrifying. It meant confrontation. It meant reliving trauma. It meant risking everything on the hope that one man might actually listen. Victoria thought about Carter. About the way he'd wrapped his arms around her neck and said, "Will you stay?" About how she'd already abandoned him once and spent 4 years drowning in regret. She picked up the envelope. Then she walked toward the main house. Security tried to stop her at the door. "Ms. Monroe, you were told to leave the property. I need 5 minutes with Mr. Castellano. 5 minutes to show him something. Then if he still wants me gone, I'll go." The security guard spoke into his radio. A tense pause. Then, "Mr. Castellano will see you in the study. You have 5 minutes." Victoria walked through the mansion one last time, her heart pounding. Julian's envelope clutched in her hands like a lifeline. Dominic stood by the window, his back to her, rigid with anger. "You have 5 minutes, he said without turning around. "Make them count." Victoria set the envelope on his desk. 4 years ago, your grandfather had me drugged and artificially inseminated without my consent to create an heir for the Castellano family. Everything you think you know about that night is a lie. And the proof is in that envelope. The words hung in the air like a grenade with the pin pulled. Slowly Dominic turned around. His face was pale. His eyes were sharp with disbelief and something else, something that looked almost like hope. "What did you just say?" "Open the envelope," Victoria said. "Then decide if I'm a liar. Or if I'm a victim." Dominic stared at her for a long moment. Then he picked up the envelope and opened it. And Victoria watched as everything he thought he knew about his family began to crumble. Subscribe now, because what Dominic discovers in that envelope will change everything. The war between truth and power is about to begin. And this family's darkest secrets? They're about to explode into the light. Dominic read in silence for 11 minutes. Victoria watched his face change with each document he pulled from the envelope. Disbelief. Horror. Rage. Grief. Every emotion flickering across his features like a storm rolling in. Bank statements showing $50,000 wired to Diane Hayes 2 days after the gala. Medical records from a private clinic detailing a procedure performed on an unconscious female patient. Audio files time-stamped and labeled. Photographs of Angelo meeting with Julian Torres outside the penthouse. When Dominic finally looked up, his hands were shaking. "My grandfather did this." His voice was barely audible. "He had you drugged. He had you violated. He created my son without either of our consent." "Yes," Victoria whispered. Dominic stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. He walked to the window, braced his hands against the frame, and stood there breathing like a man drowning. "I searched for you," he said. "For 11 months I had 3 firms looking for Victoria Hayes. I wanted to find you. To bring you into Carter's life. To understand why you left him." "I left him because I had nothing," Victoria said. "I was living in my car. I gave birth alone on a hospital floor. I thought giving Carter to you was the only way to save him. I didn't know," her voice broke. "I didn't know that your grandfather orchestrated the entire thing. That he paid my mother to throw me out. That everything that happened was part of his plan." Dominic turned around and Victoria saw tears on his face. "He used both of us. He turned us into breeding stock for his empire." "I wanted to tell you the truth when I applied for the nanny position," Victoria said quickly. "But I was terrified. I thought you'd reject me. I thought you'd take Carter away permanently. I just wanted to see my son. To know he was safe. To be close to him for however long I could. You should have told me immediately. Would you have believed me? Without evidence? A woman you didn't remember claiming your grandfather assaulted her to create your heir." Victoria shook her head. "You would have thrown me out before I could finish explaining. Just like you did an hour ago." The accusation landed like a slap. Dominic flinched. "I thought you abandoned Carter," he said quietly. "I thought you were a deadbeat mother who got scared and ran. Finding out you'd come back as his nanny, it felt like manipulation. Like you were playing some twisted game. I was trying to survive. And trying to be close to the child I've grieved for 4 years." Dominic sank into his chair, head in his hands. What am I supposed to do with this information? My grandfather is dead. I can't confront him. I can't make him pay for what he did. But we can make sure Carter knows the truth, Victoria said. That he wasn't abandoned by a mother who didn't care. That I loved him enough to give him a better life even though it destroyed me. That's all I want. For my son to know he was loved. Our son, Dominic corrected, looking up. He's our son. And you're his mother. Not a nanny. Not a stranger. His mother. The words hit Victoria with unexpected force. After 4 years of secret grief, of being invisible, of carrying shame she didn't deserve, someone finally acknowledged who she really was. Amanda can't know about this, Dominic said suddenly. Not yet. If she finds out that Carter's conception was legally questionable, she'll use it. She'll try to challenge his inheritance rights. Julian said the same thing. Julian Torres gave you this evidence? He came to me after you threw me out. He's been carrying guilt for 4 years. He wants to make it right. Dominic's jaw tightened. I should have him arrested. He's trying to help. He has more evidence stored elsewhere. If anything happens to him, it goes directly to the press. He's protecting both of us. A knock on the study door interrupted them. Francesca's voice filtered through. Mr. Castellano, Carter is asking for Ms. Monroe. He's quite upset. Dominic and Victoria looked at each other. What do we tell him? Victoria asked. The truth, Dominic said. Not everything. Not yet. But he deserves to know you're his mother. Victoria's heart stuttered. Now, today? He already knows on some level. Children sense these things. You saw how he reacted to you the first day. He recognized something he couldn't explain. We give him the words for what he already feels. They found Carter in his bedroom, sitting on his bed with trunks clutched to his chest, tears streaming down his face. You were leaving, he said to Victoria, his voice broken and accusing. I heard Daddy yelling. You were leaving like the other nannies. Victoria crossed the room and knelt in front of him. I'm not going anywhere, sweetheart. You promise? I promise. Dominic sat down on the other side of Carter's bed. Buddy, Ms. Monroe and I need to tell you something important. Something that's going to sound strange at first, but it's good news. I promise it's good news. Carter looked between them, his small face serious and scared. Victoria took a deep breath. Carter, do you remember how you said I smell like your mama? He nodded. That's because I am your mama. Silence filled the room. Carter stared at her, his 4-year-old brain trying to process impossible information. But you left me, he whispered finally. When I was a baby. You left me at the gate. I did, Victoria said, tears sliding down her face. Because I loved you too much to keep you in a place where you couldn't have everything you deserved. I was very poor. I didn't have a home or food or anything I could give you. Your daddy had everything. So I left you with him because I wanted you to be safe and happy and cared for. But you came back, Carter said. I came back because I missed you every single day. And when I saw that your daddy needed a nanny, I thought maybe I could see you one more time. Maybe I could help take care of you and make sure you were okay. Did you stay because you love me? I stayed because I love you more than anything in the entire world, Victoria said, pulling him into her arms. I have always loved you. From the moment you were born until right now. And I will love you forever. Carter wrapped his arms around her neck and buried his face in her shoulder, the same way he had the first day they met. I knew you'd come back, he whispered. I dreamed about you. And then you were here. Dominic watched them, his expression complicated, grief and relief and something else. Something that looked almost like longing. So Ms. Monroe is my mama? Carter asked, pulling back to look at both adults. Yes, Dominic said. And from now on you can call her whatever you want. Mama. Mom. Victoria. Whatever feels right to you. Carter thought about this very seriously. Then he looked at Victoria. Can I call you Mama? Victoria couldn't speak through her tears. She just nodded. Mama, Carter said, testing the word. Then again louder, Mama. He threw his arms around her again, and Victoria held him like she'd wanted to for 4 years, without fear of losing him, without pretending to be someone else. What happens now? Carter asked. Does Mama live here forever? Dominic and Victoria's eyes met over Carter's head. We're figuring that out, Dominic said carefully. But your mama isn't going anywhere. I promise you that. A commotion erupted downstairs. Voices raised in argument. Francesca's sharp tone cutting through someone else's protest. Then Amanda appeared in Carter's doorway, her face flushed with fury. What is she still doing here? Amanda demanded. Dominic, you said she was leaving. Security said she was escorted off the property. Plans changed, Dominic said, standing up. Plans changed? Amanda's voice rose to a shrill pitch. She lied to you. She manipulated you. She abandoned her own child and then wormed her way back into your life by. Enough, Dominic cut her off, his voice hard as steel. You don't know what you're talking about. I know exactly what I'm talking about. She's a con artist. She's using Carter to get access to your money and… She's Carter's mother, Dominic said flatly. And she's staying. Amanda's mouth fell open. What? Victoria is Carter's biological mother. She's not leaving. She's moving into the main house. And you need to leave. Now. You can't be serious. After everything I've done? Everything you've done? Dominic's laugh was bitter. You hired a private investigator to dig into Victoria's past. You threatened her. You tried to have her removed from this house. You've shown nothing but cruelty toward my son and his mother. Why would I want you anywhere near my family? Your family? Amanda's face twisted with rage. I'm your fiancé. I'm supposed to be your wife in 3 months. The engagement is over. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Amanda stared at him, shock giving way to vicious anger. You're breaking up with me for her? For some nobody who abandoned her own child. I'm breaking up with you because you've shown me exactly who you are. And I don't want that person in Carter's life. Amanda's eyes narrowed. You'll regret this. My father has investments in Castellano Industries. Business relationships that could… Threaten me all you want, Dominic said coldly. It won't change anything. We're done. Get out of my house. Amanda looked at Victoria, her expression pure venom. This isn't over. I don't know what game you're playing, but I will expose you. I will destroy you. Good luck with that, Victoria said quietly, meeting her gaze without flinching. Amanda stormed out, her heels clicking furiously against marble floors. Carter pressed closer to Victoria. Is the mean lady gone? Yes, sweetheart, Victoria said. She's gone. Dominic sank onto the bed, suddenly looking exhausted. This is going to get complicated. It's already complicated, Victoria said. Amanda will retaliate. She'll dig deeper into what happened 4 years ago. If she finds out about Angelo's involvement, then we'll deal with it, Victoria said. Together. The word felt strange in her mouth. Together. She'd been alone for so long, she'd forgotten what it felt like to have someone stand beside her instead of against her. Dominic looked at her, really looked at her, for the first time since she'd walked back into his study with Julian's envelope. I'm sorry, he said. For what my grandfather did to you. For the life you lost. For the pain you've carried. None of it was your fault. It wasn't yours either, Victoria said. But it's my family's responsibility. My grandfather's crimes. That falls on me now. Then we figure out how to make it right. For Carter. For us. Carter yawned, exhausted from emotional upheaval. Victoria tucked him into bed, kissed his forehead and whispered, I love you. I love you too, Mama, Carter mumbled, already half asleep. Outside Carter's room, Dominic and Victoria stood in the hallway, suddenly awkward with each other. You can stay in the guest house tonight, Dominic said. Tomorrow we'll figure out better arrangements. Something more permanent. Thank you. Victoria? Dominic's voice stopped her as she turned to leave. I'm glad you came back. Even though it's complicated. Even though everything's a mess. I'm glad Carter has his mother. Victoria nodded, unable to trust her voice. But as she walked back to the guest house, she couldn't shake the feeling that they'd just stepped into a war zone. Amanda Whitmore wasn't the type to accept defeat quietly. And somewhere in Chicago, Victoria's mother and brother were still out there. 2 people who'd sold her out once and wouldn't hesitate to do it again. Subscribe now because the battle for Carter is just beginning. Amanda's revenge is coming. And the secrets buried in the Castellano family? They're about to claw their way to the surface in the most explosive way possible. Victoria moved into the main house 3 days later. Not the guest house. Not a temporary arrangement. A proper bedroom on the 2nd floor, down the hall from Carter's room, with windows overlooking the lake and space enough to finally breathe. For the first time in 4 years, Victoria woke up knowing where her son was. Knowing he was safe. Knowing she could walk down the hall and see him whenever she wanted. It felt like a dream she was terrified of waking from. Carter adapted to calling her Mama, with the ease of a child who'd been waiting his whole life for permission. He held her hand everywhere they went. He insisted she read him bedtime stories. He introduced her to his stuffed animals like she was meeting royalty. Dominic watched their interactions with an expression Victoria couldn't quite read. Not jealousy. Not resentment. Something softer. Something that looked almost like relief. "He's happier than I've ever seen him," Dominic said one evening, standing in the doorway of Carter's room while Victoria tucked their son into bed. "He needed his mother," Victoria said simply. "We both did," Dominic replied, then walked away before she could process what that meant. The peace lasted exactly 6 days. On Thursday morning, Victoria's phone rang with a number she hadn't seen in 4 years. Her mother. Victoria's hand shook as she stared at the screen. Every instinct screamed not to answer. But curiosity, or maybe the faint, pathetic hope that her mother had changed, made her swipe to accept. "Victoria." Diane Hay's voice was exactly as she remembered. Sure. Calculating. Cold as winter. Or should I say Victoria Monroe? Interesting name change. Trying to run from your past. "What do you want?" Victoria's voice came out flat. "I want what I'm owed. I saw the article in the Tribune. Billionaire Dominic Castellano calls off engagement to Amanda Whitmore. The gossip blogs are saying he's involved with his son's nanny. That would be you, wouldn't it?" Victoria's blood ran cold. "How did you? I'm your mother. You think I haven't been keeping tabs? You disappeared for 4 years, changed your name, and now you're living in a mansion with a billionaire and the grandson I never got to meet. Seems like you've done well for yourself. You threw me out. You took money from Angelo Castellano to stay silent about what he did to me. You have no right." "I have every right," Diane cut her off. "I raised you, fed you, kept a roof over your head for 24 years. And how do you repay me? By cutting me out of your success." "Success." Victoria's laugh was bitter. "I was homeless. I gave birth alone on a hospital floor. I lost 4 years with my son because of choices you forced me to make." "Choices you made," Diane corrected. "Don't blame me for your mistakes. But I'm willing to let bygones be bygones. For a price." There it was. The real reason for the call. "You want money," Victoria said. "I want what's fair. $200,000. That's nothing to the Castellanos. Pocket change. You pay me, I stay out of your life. I don't contact the press. I don't tell them about how you abandoned your baby. How you're an unfit mother who. I'm not giving you anything. Then I'll tell them everything. About the gala. About Angelo Castellano. About how you got pregnant and ran away. I'll make sure every news outlet in Chicago knows what kind of woman Dominic Castellano is raising his son with." Victoria's grip tightened on the phone. "You'd destroy your own daughter's life for money? I do what I need to survive. Just like you did when you left that baby on a doorstep in January." Diane's voice turned venomous. "You're no better than me, Victoria. You just got luckier." The line went dead. Victoria sat on her bed, hands shaking, nausea rising in her throat. Her mother was going to expose her. Going to twist the story. Going to make Victoria look like a monster in the press unless she paid extortion money she didn't have. A knock on her door made her jump. "Victoria?" Dominic's voice. "Can I come in?" She opened the door. He took one look at her face and his expression darkened. "What happened?" "My mother called. She wants $200,000 or she's going to the press with her version of what happened 4 years ago." Dominic's jaw clenched. "Let her." "What?" "Let her go to the press. We have documentation. We have proof of what Angelo did. We have bank records showing he paid her to stay silent. If she wants to play this game, we'll bury her." "But Carter?" "Carter already knows you're his mother. Carter already knows you love him. Whatever your mother says to the press won't change that." Dominic stepped closer. "You're not alone anymore, Victoria. You don't have to face her by yourself." The words cracked something open inside Victoria's chest. For 4 years she'd faced everything alone. Every crisis. Every betrayal. Every impossible choice. But Dominic was right. She wasn't alone anymore. "We should tell Julian," Victoria said. "If my mother is making moves, Amanda probably is too. They might even be working together." Dominic pulled out his phone. "I'll call him. We need to get ahead of this before." His phone rang before he could dial. An unknown number. He answered on speaker. "Dominic Castellano." "Mr. Castellano." The voice was male, professional, unfamiliar. "This is Marcus Hayes, Victoria's brother. I think we need to talk about my sister and my nephew. And how much it's worth to you to keep certain information private." Victoria's stomach dropped. Her brother. The one who'd been in and out of jail. The one who'd watched their mother throw her out and said nothing. Now he wanted money too. How much? Dominic asked, his voice dangerously calm. $500,000. Small price for protecting your family's reputation. Go to hell, Dominic said and hung up. He looked at Victoria. How many people from your past are going to come crawling out demanding payment? I don't know, Victoria whispered. Everyone who ever knew me saw me as worthless. Now that I'm connected to you, they see opportunity. Then we cut them off. Publicly. Permanently. Dominic's expression was steel. I'll have my lawyers draft a statement. We tell the truth on our terms before your family twists it into something ugly. The press will destroy me. They'll call me a gold digger. They'll say I trapped you. They'll say whatever gets them clicks, Dominic interrupted. But we control the narrative. We tell them about Angelo's crimes. About your mother taking money to stay silent. About how you survived despite everything your family did to you. We make you the victim you actually are, not the villain they want you to be. Victoria wanted to believe him. But she'd spent 4 years being invisible, being nobody, being safe in obscurity. Going public meant exposure. Judgment. Scrutiny. I need to think about this, she said. Think fast. Because your family isn't going to wait. And neither is Amanda. That night Victoria couldn't sleep. She paced her room, watching moonlight reflect off the lake, trying to decide between safety and truth. At 2 a.m. her phone buzzed with a text from another unknown number. Your mother and Amanda Whitmore met for lunch today. Thought you should know. JT. Victoria stared at the message, ice flooding her veins. Her mother and Amanda. Working together. Planning something. She forwarded the text to Dominic. His reply came 30 seconds later, meeting in my study. Now. Victoria threw on a robe and hurried downstairs. Dominic was already there, laptop open, making phone calls. Julian's sending surveillance footage from the restaurant, Dominic said. We'll know exactly what they discussed. 10 minutes later, the video file arrived. They watched in silence as Diane Hayes and Amanda Whitmore sat across from each other at an upscale restaurant, smiling like old friends conspiring over wine. Julian had included a transcript. Audio enhancement technology had captured their conversation. Victoria read it and felt her world tilt. Amanda, if we work together, we can destroy her. Diane, what's in it for me? Amanda, Dominic will pay anything to make scandal go away. We split whatever we get. 50-50. Diane, what about the kid? Amanda, Carter? He's leverage. Victoria won't fight back if we threaten to take him away. Diane, how do we do that? Amanda, child services. Anonymous tip about an unfit mother with a history of abandonment. They'll investigate. Even if it goes nowhere, it'll terrify her. She'll pay to make it stop. Diane, and if she doesn't pay? Amanda, then we go nuclear. Tabloids. Tell all interviews. I'll say she seduced Dominic to trap him. You'll say she was always manipulative and unstable. By the time we're done, she'll lose everything. Again. The transcript ended. Victoria couldn't breathe. Her own mother was plotting to take Carter away. To use her son as a weapon. Dominic's face had gone pale with rage. They're threatening Carter. We can't let them do this, Victoria said, her voice shaking. We can't let them anywhere near him. We won't. Dominic stood, pacing like a caged animal. I'm calling my lawyers. We're filing restraining orders against both of them. We're going to the police with this recording. Conspiracy. Extortion. Attempted blackmail. They're both finished. Will that be enough? It has to be. Dominic stopped pacing and looked at her. But Victoria, this is going to get ugly. The press will find out. Your family's crimes will become public. Your story will become public. Are you ready for that? Victoria thought about Carter asleep upstairs. About the life they were building. About the choice between hiding forever and fighting back. I'm ready, she said. I spent 4 years running and hiding. I'm done being afraid of people who hurt me. Dominic nodded. Then we fight. Together. The word sent warmth through Victoria's chest. Together. She wasn't alone anymore. But as they began planning their counterattack, neither of them noticed the shadow moving past the study window. Someone had been listening. And that someone was about to make everything infinitely worse. Subscribe now because the war is escalating. Victoria's family is about to learn what happens when you threaten a mother's child. And Dominic? He's about to show them why the Castellano name still means power in Chicago. The lawyers arrived at 8 a.m. sharp. 3 of them, carrying briefcases thick with documents, wearing expressions that suggested they'd seen everything and were prepared to destroy anything. Victoria sat in Dominic's study, Carter playing quietly with blocks in the corner, while the attorneys laid out their strategy like generals planning a siege. "We have enough for criminal charges," the lead attorney said. Her name was Catherine Reeves, and she had the kind of sharp intelligence that made Victoria feel safe for the first time in days. "Conspiracy to commit extortion. Attempted blackmail. Harassment. Your mother and Amanda Whitmore are looking at serious jail time if we pursue this aggressively." "Pursue it," Dominic said without hesitation. "I want them both prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law." "There will be media attention," Catherine warned. "Once we file charges, the press will dig into the backstory. Victoria's past. Carter's conception. Angelo Castellano's crimes. All of it becomes public record." Victoria's hands clenched in her lap. "Will Carter be affected?" "We'll petition to keep his name out of court documents. He's a minor, so there are protections. But there's no way to completely shield him from this. Eventually he'll hear things. See things. You need to be prepared for that." Victoria looked at Carter, still innocent and oblivious, building a tower from wooden blocks. What would he think when he was old enough to understand? When he learned his conception was an assault? That his mother had been betrayed by everyone who should have protected her? "We'll tell him the truth when he's ready," Dominic said quietly, reading her thoughts. "Age appropriately. With therapists to help him process it. But he'll know his mother is a survivor, not a victim. There's a difference." Catherine continued, "I also recommend filing for full custody, Victoria. Right now you have no legal rights to Carter. If something happened to Dominic, you'd have no claim." The thought sent ice through Victoria's veins. "Can we do that? Given the circumstances of his birth?" "The circumstances make it more complicated, but not impossible. You're his biological mother. You can prove Dominic is his biological father. The conception method doesn't negate biology. We file for shared custody, establish your parental rights, and ensure no one can take Carter from you again." "Do it," Victoria said. "Whatever it takes." "There's one more issue," Catherine said, exchanging glances with her colleagues. "Amanda Whitmore's father, Richard Whitmore, owns significant commercial real estate in Chicago. He has investments in several companies that do business with Castellano Industries. If we prosecute his daughter, he may retaliate financially." "Let him try," Dominic said coldly. "I'm not protecting criminal behavior because of business relationships. If Richard wants to pull his investments, he can find out how quickly the Castellano name can make him irrelevant in this city." Catherine smiled, a predator recognizing another predator. "I'll draft the paperwork. We file charges by end of business today. Restraining orders will be in place by tomorrow morning. And Victoria, you'll need to prepare a statement. Your side of the story. We'll release it simultaneously with the charges so the narrative is controlled from the start." After the lawyers left, Victoria sat at Dominic's desk, staring at a blank document on the laptop screen. Her statement. Her truth. The story she'd buried for 4 years. "I don't know where to start," she said. Dominic pulled up a chair beside her. "Start with what they did to you. Not what you did to survive." Victoria's fingers hovered over the keyboard. Then she began typing. "My name is Victoria Hayes Monroe. 4 years ago, I was drugged and medically assaulted by Angelo Castellano as part of a scheme to create an heir for his family empire." The words poured out. Years of silence breaking apart. Truth finally clawing its way into light. She wrote about the gala. About waking up with no memory. About her mother's betrayal. About giving birth alone. About the impossible choice to leave Carter in Dominic's care. She wrote about 4 years of grief and guilt. About changing her name to escape her past. About seeing the nanny job posting and making the desperate decision to apply. "I didn't come back to manipulate or deceive," she wrote. "I came back because a mother's love doesn't disappear just because circumstances force impossible choices. I came back because I needed to know my son was safe and happy. And when I saw him for the first time in 4 years, when he wrapped his arms around me and called me Mama, I knew I couldn't walk away again." By the time she finished, tears were streaming down her face. Dominic read over her shoulder in silence. When she looked up at him, his expression was complicated. "This is good," he said quietly. "This is honest. People will understand." "Some will," Victoria said. "Others will call me a liar. A gold digger. An unfit mother. Let them. The people whose opinions matter, the people who've actually survived trauma, they'll recognize the truth when they see it." That afternoon, the legal machinery began moving. Charges filed. Restraining orders processed. Victoria's statement released through a carefully worded press release from Castellano Industries' PR team. By 5 p.m., the story had exploded across Chicago media. Castellano heir's mother reveals grandfather's crimes. Billionaire family scandal. Assault, extortion, betrayal. Victoria Monroe breaks silence on 4-year nightmare. Victoria's phone erupted with notifications. News requests. Interview offers. Messages from people she hadn't spoken to in years. She turned it off and focused on Carter. They made dinner together, grilled cheese sandwiches because Carter insisted they were celebration food. They read stories. They built a blanket fort in the living room and pretended to be explorers in a jungle. Normal. Safe. Together. But at 9 p.m., while Carter slept peacefully upstairs, the first threatening message arrived. It came through the estate's main email. Anonymous sender. You think you've won? You just started a war you can't win. We're coming for Carter. And when we're done, you'll wish you'd stayed disappeared. A friend. Victoria showed Dominic. His face went dark. Security is being doubled, he said immediately. No one gets on this property without background checks. Carter doesn't leave the estate without armed guards. And we traced this email. They're trying to scare me into backing down. Are you scared? Victoria thought about Carter upstairs. About how he'd smiled at dinner. About how he'd called her mama like it was the most natural thing in the world. I'm terrified, she admitted. But I'm not backing down. Dominic's hand found hers. His grip was warm. Solid. Real. Neither am I. That night, Victoria lay in bed staring at the ceiling, sleep impossible. Somewhere out there, her mother and Amanda were planning their next move. And Victoria had no idea what form that move would take. At 3 a.m., her burner phone, the one she'd kept from her old life, buzzed with a text from a number she'd never saved but instantly recognized. Marcus. Her brother. Cops came to question me about extortion charges. Mom's freaking out. She says you destroyed the family. Says you owe us for raising you. Victoria, I know we weren't great to you, but she's still our mother. Can't you drop the charges? For family? Victoria stared at the message, anger building in her chest. For family. After everything they'd done. After selling her out. After threatening Carter. They wanted mercy for family. She typed back, you stopped being my family the day you watched Mom throw me out while pregnant. Carter is my family now. Stay away from us or you'll join her in jail. She blocked the number and threw the phone across the room. But sleep still wouldn't come. Because deep down, Victoria knew her family wouldn't stop. They'd been taught by Angelo Castellano that the rich could be extorted. That weakness could be exploited. That threatening the right pressure points would yield results. And the most vulnerable pressure point in Victoria's life was sleeping down the hall. She got up and walked quietly to Carter's room. He was sprawled across his bed, Trunks the elephant tucked under one arm, breathing deeply in the way only children can, completely unaware of the danger circling his life. Victoria sat in the chair beside his bed and watched him sleep. I won't let them hurt you, she whispered. I don't care what it costs. I don't care what I have to do. You're safe. You're loved. And I'm never leaving you again. Carter stirred slightly, his hand reaching out in sleep. Victoria took it and held on tight. Outside, the first light of dawn began breaking over the lake. And in Chicago, the war was just beginning. Subscribe now because what happens next will change everything. Victoria's family is about to discover they picked the wrong mother to threaten. And Dominic? He's about to show them exactly why you don't come after a Castellano's child and expect to walk away unscathed. The attack came 48 hours after the charges were filed. Not physical. Not violent. Something far more insidious. At 7 a.m. on Saturday morning, every major news outlet in Chicago received an anonymous package. Inside were photographs, grainy but clear enough. Victoria living in her car 4 years ago. Victoria entering a homeless shelter. Victoria looking haggard and desperate outside a pawn shop. Attached to each photo was a typed letter on expensive stationery. Victoria Hayes Monroe is an unstable, mentally ill woman who abandoned her infant son in the dead of winter. She has no business raising a child. The Chicago Department of Children and Family Services should investigate immediately. A concerned citizen. By 9 a.m. the story had shifted. Is Carter Castellano safe? Questions raised about mother's mental health. Victoria Monroe's dark past. Homeless, desperate, unstable. DCFS investigating Castellano household following anonymous tip. Victoria stood in Dominic's study, hands shaking as she scrolled through article after article, watching her carefully constructed narrative crumble under the weight of selective truth twisted into weapon. They used my worst moments against me, she whispered. My homelessness, my desperation. They're making it look like I'm dangerous. Dominic was on the phone with Catherine Reeves, his voice sharp and controlled. I don't care what strings you have to pull. I want DCFS to understand this is a malicious attack, not a legitimate concern. Get it handled. But even as he spoke, a black sedan pulled up the circular driveway. 2 social workers. Government badges. Grim expressions. They're here, Victoria said, her voice hollow. Carter appeared in the doorway, still in his dinosaur pajamas, sensing the tension in the air. Mama? What's wrong? Victoria knelt down and pulled him close. Nothing's wrong, sweetheart. Some people need to talk to Daddy and me for a little while. Why don't you go play in your room? Are they taking you away? The question pierced Victoria's heart. No, baby. No one's taking me anywhere. I promise. But she couldn't be sure. And that uncertainty was its own kind of torture. The social workers were professional but thorough. They interviewed Dominic and Victoria separately. They toured the house. They examined Carter's room, his toys, his daily schedule. One of them, a woman in her 50s named Patricia Chin, sat down with Victoria in the living room. Ms. Monroe, I need to ask you some difficult questions about your mental health history. I've never been diagnosed with any mental illness, Victoria said carefully. But you experienced homelessness, significant trauma, gave birth alone. These are risk factors for depression, anxiety, PTSD. They're also risk factors for being a poor woman in America, Victoria said, her voice steady despite the fear clawing at her chest. I survived circumstances designed to destroy me. That doesn't make me unstable. It makes me resilient. Patricia's expression softened slightly. I've read your statement. About what Angelo Castellano did. About your mother's betrayal. If those allegations are true, they are true. We have documentation. Bank records. Medical files. Audio recordings. Everything. Then you're a victim who survived extraordinary circumstances. But I have to consider Carter's well-being. Can you provide him with a stable, safe environment given your history? Victoria looked Patricia Chin directly in the eyes. 4 years ago I had nothing. Today I have resources, support, and most importantly, I have my son. I wake up every morning in a home instead of a car. I eat 3 meals a day instead of 1. I have access to therapy, medical care, legal protection. I'm not the desperate woman in those photographs anymore. I'm a mother fighting for her child. And I will not lose him again. The assessment took 3 hours. When the social workers finally left, they offered no immediate conclusions. We'll file our report within 72 hours. Someone will be in touch. Victoria collapsed onto the couch the moment they were gone, adrenaline crashing, leaving her hollow. Dominic sat beside her. They can't take him. We have too much evidence of your fitness as a mother. This is harassment, not legitimate concern. But what if they don't see it that way? What if they decide a mother with a history of homelessness and abandonment is too risky? Then we fight. We appeal. We use every resource available. Victoria, look at me. She turned to face him. No one is taking Carter from us, Dominic said, his voice fierce with certainty. I don't care who I have to buy, threaten, or destroy. Our son stays with his parents. Both of them. Our son. His parents. The words wrapped around Victoria like armor. That night, while Victoria tucked Carter into bed, he asked the question she'd been dreading. Mama, are you going to leave again? Never, Victoria said, kissing his forehead. I'm staying right here with you forever. You promise? I promise. What if the people make you leave? Victoria smoothed his hair back. Then your daddy and I will fight to come back. But no matter what happens, I will always be your mama. Even if I'm not in the same room, even if we're far apart, I will always love you. Distance doesn't change that. Carter thought about this seriously. Like how the sun is always there even when it's nighttime? Exactly like that. You're my son, Carter. And I'm never letting you go dark. He fell asleep holding her hand. Victoria was walking back to her room when she heard Dominic's voice from his office. She paused outside the door. I don't care about the optics, Julian. I want Diane Hayes and Marcus Hayes arrested tonight. Yes, both of them. The photographs they sent to the press were taken while Victoria had a restraining order against them. That's violation number 1. And I have proof they're coordinating with Amanda Whitmore. That's conspiracy. Pause. Because they threatened my family. And I'm done playing defense. It's time they learned what happens when you come after a Castellano. Victoria stepped into the doorway. Dominic looked up, phone still pressed to his ear. "I'll call you back," he said to Julian, then hung up. "You're having them arrested," Victoria said. "I'm having them held accountable. There's a difference. Dominic, they're still my family. My mother, my brother. They stopped being your family the moment they weaponized your trauma for profit." Dominic stood and crossed to her. "You don't owe them mercy. You don't owe them anything." "I know. But part of me," Victoria's voice broke, "part of me still wishes they were different. That they'd loved me the way parents are supposed to love their children." Dominic pulled her into an embrace. It was the first time he'd held her like this, close, protective, solid. "Their failure to love you says nothing about your worth," he said quietly. "It says everything about their brokenness." Victoria let herself lean into him just for a moment, allowing someone else to be strong when she couldn't. The arrests happened at midnight. Chicago PD showed up at Diane Hayes' apartment with warrants for her and Marcus. Charges: conspiracy to commit extortion, harassment, violation of protective orders, attempted blackmail. Amanda Whitmore was arrested at her father's estate an hour later. Same charges. By morning, all three were being processed through the Cook County jail system. Victoria watched the news coverage with a strange mixture of satisfaction and sadness. Her mother, handcuffed and furious, being led into a police car. Screaming about injustice. About ungrateful daughters. About Castellano power corrupting the system. But Victoria knew the truth. This wasn't corruption. This was consequences. For 4 years she'd been the victim. The silent one. The one who absorbed abuse and betrayal without fighting back. Not anymore. The DCFS report arrived 71 hours after the investigation began. Victoria's hands shook as she opened the email. After thorough assessment of the Castellano household, we find no evidence of neglect, abuse, or instability. Victoria Monroe demonstrates appropriate parenting skills, emotional stability, and genuine commitment to Carter Castellano's well-being. The anonymous complaint appears to be malicious in nature rather than based on legitimate concern. Case closed. No further action required. Victoria read it 3 times before she could breathe. She ran to find Dominic. He was in his office, conference call with his legal team about Amanda's trial. "We won," she said, bursting through the door. "DCFS cleared me. Case closed." Dominic stood, a smile breaking across his face, the first genuine smile she'd seen from him in days. "Of course they did. Because you're an excellent mother." Victoria laughed, the sound half sob, half relief. "I can't believe it's over." "It's not over," Dominic corrected gently. "The trial is still coming. But the immediate threat to Carter is neutralized. That's what matters." Over the next 6 weeks, the pieces fell into place. Catherine Reeves built an airtight case against Diane Hayes, Marcus Hayes, and Amanda Whitmore. The evidence was overwhelming: recorded conversations, financial transactions, email trails documenting their conspiracy. Diane pled guilty to avoid trial. 18 months in minimum security prison, 5 years probation afterward. Marcus took a plea deal. 2 years, eligible for parole in 14 months. Amanda fought the charges, convinced her family's wealth and connections would save her. But the Whitmore name carried less weight than she'd believed. And facing down the full force of Castellano legal power proved impossible. She was convicted on all counts. 3 years in federal prison. Her father's business relationships with Castellano Industries terminated immediately. Richard Whitmore tried to retaliate financially, pulling investments, pressuring mutual business partners. But Dominic had been right. The Castellano name still meant power in Chicago. Within 6 months, Richard's commercial real estate empire was struggling, his reputation in tatters, his daughter in prison. Victoria watched it all unfold with mixed emotions. Justice felt good. But it didn't erase the years of pain. It didn't give her back the time she'd lost with Carter. It didn't heal the wounds her family had inflicted. Still, it was something. Acknowledgement. Validation. Proof that her truth mattered. 3 months after the arrests, Victoria's custody filing was approved. She sat in a courtroom beside Dominic, listening to a judge declare her Carter's legal mother with full parental rights. "Ms. Monroe, you have joint custody with Mr. Castellano. In the event of his death or incapacity, you retain full custody. Do you understand?" "Yes, Your Honor," Victoria said, tears streaming down her face. "Thank you." Carter was waiting outside the courtroom with Francesca. When Victoria emerged, he ran to her. "Did you win, Mama?" "We won, baby. I'm officially your mama now. Forever and legally." "You were always my mama," Carter said matter-of-factly. "The judge just didn't know yet." Victoria laughed through tears and scooped him into her arms. That night, the three of them, Victoria, Dominic, and Carter, had dinner together in the mansion's formal dining room. Carter insisted on sitting between his parents, holding both their hands while Francesca served pasta. "Are you and Daddy married?" Carter asked suddenly, looking between them with innocent curiosity. Victoria nearly choked on her wine. Dominic's eyes went wide. "No, sweetheart," Victoria said carefully. "We're not married. We're just friends," Dominic supplied. "We're friends who care about you very much." Carter frowned, considering this. "My friend Tommy's parents are married. They live in the same house and have dinner together and go on trips. You do all those things. So why aren't you married?" Out of the mouths of children. Victoria and Dominic looked at each other across the table. There was a question in his eyes. Something unspoken. Something that had been building for months but neither had been brave enough to address. "That's a conversation for grown-ups," Victoria said gently. "But no matter what, we'll always be a family. The three of us. That's what matters." Carter seemed satisfied with this answer and returned to his pasta. But later, after Carter was asleep, Victoria found Dominic on the terrace overlooking the lake. "He's not wrong," Dominic said without turning around. "We do act like a married couple. We raise Carter together. We make decisions together. We live in the same house. But we're not in love," Victoria said quietly. Dominic turned to face her. "Aren't we?" The question hung in the air between them, heavy with possibility. "Dominic? I'm not saying we have to get married tomorrow," he interrupted. "I'm not even saying we have to be in a romantic relationship. But I think," he paused, choosing his words carefully, "I think we could be, if we wanted to, if we were willing to try." Victoria's heart hammered. "We started in trauma. Our entire relationship is built on crisis and survival. That's not a foundation for romance." "No," Dominic agreed. "But maybe it's a foundation for something deeper. We've seen each other at our worst. We've fought through impossible circumstances together. We've built trust in the fire. That's more than most married couples have. You don't owe me a relationship because we share a child. I'm not offering out of obligation. I'm offering because somewhere between you walking back into my life and now, I started looking forward to seeing you every morning. I started valuing your opinion more than anyone else's. I started imagining a future where you're not just Carter's mother. Where you're my partner. My equal. He stopped, searching for the right word. "Your wife," Victoria finished quietly. "If you want to be." Victoria looked out at the lake, at the moonlight reflecting off dark water, at the life she'd somehow built from the ashes of her worst moments. 6 months ago she'd had nothing. No home, no family, no hope. Now she had a son who loved her. A man who saw her worth. A future that looked nothing like her past. "I'm terrified," she admitted. "Of trusting this. Of believing it's real. Of letting myself be happy when I'm used to survival." "So am I," Dominic said. "But maybe that's how we know it matters. Because it scares us and we're choosing it anyway." Victoria turned to face him. "If we do this, if we try, we do it slowly. No rushing. No grand gestures. We date. We see if this is real outside of crisis mode. Deal? And if it doesn't work, we stay co-parents. We stay friends. We don't let whatever happens between us hurt Carter. Deal? And you have to understand, I'm still healing. I'm still learning how to trust. I'm still." Dominic stepped closer and took her hand. "We're both still healing. That's okay. We heal together." Victoria looked down at their joined hands, scarred and imperfect and real. "Okay," she whispered. "Let's try." He smiled then, that rare, genuine smile that transformed his entire face. And for the first time in 4 years, Victoria let herself believe in possibility. 6 months later, on Carter's 5th birthday, Dominic proposed. Not with a flashy public gesture. Not with photographers or witnesses. Just the three of them in Carter's room after his birthday party, surrounded by wrapping paper and cake crumbs and joy. "Carter and I have a question for you," Dominic said, kneeling down beside their son. Carter held out a small velvet box, his face serious and excited. "Mama, will you marry us?" Carter asked. "So we can be a real family forever?" "We're already a real family," Victoria said, tears streaming. "But this way it's official," Carter insisted. Victoria looked at Dominic. At the man who'd stood beside her through every battle. Who'd chosen her when he could have walked away. Who'd loved her not despite her scars but because of the strength they represented. "Yes," she said. "Yes, I'll marry you. Both of you." Carter whooped with joy. Dominic slipped a simple diamond ring onto her finger. Elegant, understated, perfect. They were married 3 months later in a small ceremony at the estate. Just family, the family they'd chosen, not the one they'd been born into. Julian Torres attended, finally at peace with his role in their story. Catherine Reeves came, celebrating the victory she'd helped secure. Francesca stood as Victoria's witness, the woman who'd welcomed her into the house when everyone else saw only suspicion. And Carter, of course, holding the rings, declaring himself the most important person in the wedding because, "You wouldn't be getting married without me." He wasn't wrong. When the officiant pronounced them husband and wife, when Dominic kissed Victoria for the first time as her husband, when Carter threw his arms around both of them and shouted, "Now we're married too," Victoria understood that happy endings weren't fairy tales. They were hard-won victories built on survival, truth, and the audacity to believe in second chances. Years later, when Carter was older and finally ready to hear the full story of his birth, Victoria told him everything. About the gala. About Angelo's crimes. About the desperate choices she'd made. About the 4 years of separation. About fighting her way back to him. Carter listened quietly, processing, understanding. Then he said, "You gave me up so I could have a better life. That's the most loving thing anyone could do. Thank you for choosing me twice, Mama. Once when you left me somewhere safe. And once when you came back." Victoria held her son, her miracle, her heartbreak, her redemption, and knew that every moment of pain had been worth it. Because she'd survived. She'd fought. She'd won. And she was finally, truly, impossibly home. If you loved this story of survival, truth, and second chances, subscribe now. Because on this channel, we believe that justice always comes, even when you have to fight for it yourself. And remember, you're never too broken to rebuild. You're never too far gone to come home. And you're never alone in your fight. Thank you for staying until the end. Hit that subscribe button for more stories of ordinary people who refuse to stay victims. We post 3 times a week and trust me, you won't want to miss what's coming next.